Hey, 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 comic book friends. It's Sleepy Reader here, aka Damien, and this time around, I'm yet again doing a comic book countdown. Um, I think I've been doing these comic book countdowns for a year or more, have I? I don't know. And I keep thinking about switching it up. But, and I've been doing comic book thoughts videos, or videos I call comic book thoughts. You might call them comic book reviews, or you might not, for probably 8 years. So you spend, that forces you to think about comics, certainly, if you do that kind of thing. I didn't want to do formal reviews, so I called them thoughts. But one thing I was thinking about this week as I was sorting through my comics is, and I may have mentioned it in different ways, different times, two of the things that kind of, they're not the only things, but two of the things that kind of are important to me when I read comics, and when I read so many and I try to rank them and get critical about them in my own way, is the rhythm of the comic book, the flow of it, it does feel like comic books have beats, right? Like they talk about in movies and film scripts, but not just plot beats that you hit, but beats throughout the page and that page turn, as they always talk about. But certain writers and or artists have rhythms that they bring, and it's hard to point to them, but that makes the work by those people more enjoyable. And then there's certain writers who just don't, at least for me, have the right rhythm or something, and I can't enjoy their work as well. Not that I think there's a huge example of that in the 13 comics I got this past Wednesday, that I'm going to do a countdown on 13 through 1 in a minute or so. The other thing that I think about, or was thinking about this week, that, and this is one I think I've maybe brought up more often, that part of what really makes comics, quote, addictive to me is the way you can really get a hit of story. That when you get the right combination of words and pictures, you absorb very fast a lot more story than you would even in a movie, and certainly than in a novel. What may make you take you pages to take it in a novel, and sometimes that's an enjoyable thing to read and slowly absorb a story, but you can get it in a panel or two, often in a comic when it's done right. So sometimes, I'll read a comic book and it will only take me 10 or 15 minutes, or maybe even less, I don't know. But then I'll kind of sit and either literally or figuratively sit and kind of mull over all that I've absorbed. And comics that don't quite work for me, sometimes it's because there's something getting in the way of me absorbing that story properly. I was thinking about that actually from last week's comics, with that the case of the Grendel, Kentucky, where when I reread it, the two issues together, it suddenly seemed great to me. But when I read it at first, it didn't. And part of that was, well, there was a number of reasons for that. But part of that was because of its use of a lot of wordless pages. And there weren't enough words on the page to make me slow down and, as I read it, to absorb things at the right speed, and I missed too much. And other people might not have that problem. They may read a wordless page with the same amount of care as they do a page with a lot of words on it. But for me, it does have to strike that balance between words and visual information, and somehow cause me to take in what visual information is hidden in the panels properly. And sometimes it's the words, sometimes maybe it's the coloring or the visuals. But anyway, so that was all in my thoughts, and I feel like, even though it's probably mostly subconscious, that has probably affected how I've ranked these comics, because in some ways they were all good, and they were all kind of, maybe ranged from a B minus to a B plus or something. There was no like knock it out of the park, I felt like this was a masterpiece kind of comics. Maybe I'm too free with my masterpieces, and sometimes I feel like I got 2 or 3 in a week. But anyway, I enjoyed all of them, and it was interesting. I couldn't quite say why I liked one better than the other, but there it was. At the bottom of my list, at number 13, was Conan the Barbarian. What is it? Number 15. And it's weird that Marvel took so long to release this because it was in the middle of a story. So I think this is like part 3 of an ongoing story written by Jim Zub and drawn by, it's called Traps and Tricks, which is not a very inspired title. And I think, along with the fact that the art didn't do a lot for me, I think the story, while on paper might have, or, in the head of the writer of Jim Zub, might have seemed like a cool, brutal, Hyborian Age Conan story. To me, it lacked a certain something that became really apparent in this issue where, spoilers a little bit just for a minute, where all the other characters involved in the Traps and Tricks died except for Conan. And it had no, reason for being. I mean, Conan doesn't always have to be the gallant knight who saves someone, but there's something going on if there's a group of people, some kind of relationships develop or something. And it just didn't, I could see that it wanted to, but it just didn't quite go there. And by killing everyone off and being so brutal, it kind of missed something. But art is a lot of it for me in Conan, and Rogue Antonio, who's certainly a good artist, just didn't seem, I don't know, his Conan doesn't click with me. The coloring doesn't click with me a whole lot, although there's nothing terrible about the coloring. In at number 12, Hidden Society has excellent art and coloring. So here the reason it's, lower ranked for me, I enjoyed reading it, and I loved, luxuriating in those colors and that artwork by Raphael Albuquerque. I don't think he did the colors, but he did the artwork. His colorist was Marcelo Costa. Whoever Marcelo Costa is, I don't recognize that name, is a superb colorist, and Albuquerque is a superb artist with a very satisfying story, satisfying rhythm that I was kind of talking about to his storytelling. But in this case, I didn't care enough because, as I mentioned with issue 3, also, I no longer remembered what was going on from issue 1 and 2 that came out like 7 or 8 months ago. Dark Horse has had a real problem with releasing things with such a long gap, not just the COVID comic book shutdown gap, but an even longer gap of their own. I don't know if that's because of COVID issues or what, if they had extra issues or management issues even, or something's going on there. So that really hurt Hidden Society. I'm not sure what I would have thought about it if I'd read 1, 2, 3, and 4 in a 4-month period. This is the end of the story. They do leave it hint that there could be more, and I hope there's more. And I hope to go find issues 1 and 2, which are now like lost in my basement somewhere, and dig those up and read them all together, because I did love the art so much. I wonder, they left a spot to come back, but I wonder if, given the way it's been published and everything, if it will come back. It also seemed like a story that needed more than 4 issues to fully flesh out the characters and the magical world that they are part of. Excuse me. Speaking of magical worlds, sort of in at number 11 is Madam Satan, or to be more exact, The Chilling Adventures of Sabrina presents Madam Satan. I saw this advertised and I thought, ooh, Madam Satan, I like kind of stories about hell. For, don't hold it against me, but I'm always intrigued. But it was actually in my pull list because I am getting the family-friendly version of Sabrina comics, and for some reason, because the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina is not something my daughter can read, for some reason they put this in my box. But anyway, I'm glad they did. I enjoyed it quite a bit. And I'd say that I would have ranked it higher until I realized towards the end that it's kind of a setup for something that's going to happen in the regular Sabrina series. So it's kind of like, here's the backstory to something else more important. So all I was reading was the backstory. but I did enjoy. The art was pretty good. The coloring was maybe a little. I don't know. Coloring wasn't bad, but it was a little too much on the slightly muddy look to things. Just in the, I guess, the shades that were chosen here. Anyway, it's a fun story, and it does have me intrigued. Maybe I know I can read the Chilling Adventures of Sabrina digitally for free on Hulu, and I may pursue that. I remember it having good reviews when it first came out, but I think it's been one of those books that's come out very slowly. Okay, in at number 10 is Batman. It's James Tynion still, Batman 101, and it's Gilliam March, who's a good artist, but just not quite my favorite Batman artist compared to some of the others that Tynion's been working with. But Tynion does a good job, and he has developed a nice comic book storytelling rhythm over the years. I didn't like his writing, I remember, when he first started. But this is a get us from here to there issue. We have a kind of trumped up fight with Grifter to make the issue interesting, but there was really no reason for him and Batman to fight. And as far as one can tell from this issue, it's not gonna play much in future issues. And the point of this issue was to establish Batman as a loner without a ton of money, and as such, I kind of sympathize with Tynion for wanting to do that. It's going to be kind of a fun ride going forward with Batman in that position, but it didn't make it a great issue. It made it an okay issue because it was still well drawn and well written. But many of the devices used to get Batman from here, from rich, wealthy Bruce Wayne to poor or relatively poor Bruce Wayne working on his own with no one helping him, seemed kind of weak to me. I just don't buy all this stuff of the Wayne wealth is just being passed around from the Joker to Catwoman to Lucius Fox. It doesn't really make sense. You can't just pass around someone's personal wealth that way. Look at inheritance laws. You'd have to pay 50% on everything first to the government. Or, as I mentioned before, gift tax laws, which are meant to amount to pretty much like an inheritance tax. So maybe that's just being picky on my part, but we're spending a lot of time on it just so that Bruce Wayne cannot have his money. And then I did not buy the excuse as to why Bruce could not, or why Batman could not work with his true love, Catwoman. They have to stay apart and not work together, and she can't help him and he can't help her. It didn't really make any sense. It's just there, and they try to cover it up by having them be all sexy, and they're going to go off and have sex at the end of the issue. There, I spoiled that one. Juggernaut, number 9, is number 9 on my list. It's number 2, Juggernaut number 2. Not a super fan of the coloring on that cover, or the background cover. That struck me as odd, but the art in here is just absolutely wonderful. Ron Garney art. I think Fabian Nicieza, Fabian Nikizia, I don't know how to pronounce his name. I think he's one of those writers who doesn't do it for me on the story rhythms. So that and the fact that this seemed like just kind of a made-up excuse for a long fight with the Hulk, which is kind of cool, but I just didn't buy into it a whole lot. But I still kind of love this issue because of the art, except when the colorist does this blur effect and covers up a lot of the art. There's got to be another way they could have done that. And I did think it was cool that there was this whole kind of group of people who just want a comeuppance with the Hulk, who just want to tell the Hulk how they feel about how he's ruined their lives. I thought that was a really cool idea. So it was a fun enough issue, but with the Ron Garney art and a different writer, I feel like it could be my number one. Ron Garney and his colorist, who I think is the same colorist who did Grimm with him and maybe Conan, Matt Milla. The two of them, wow me, but the script just sort of is okay. In at number 8 is Stillwater. Maybe now I'm having regrets, second thoughts. Maybe I should have put this below Juggernaut. But anyway, maybe this issue had some goodwill from what I was hoping, from what I enjoyed the first issue, and what I'm hoping for in the future with this. But I really don't like this cover, and I don't quite get it. Maybe it's referring to stuff that we'll understand later in the story. The story has kind of a cool setup, but I feel with issue 2, like I feel almost like I know everything there is I need to know, and I could almost stop reading now. It's taking the fantasy of immortality and turning it into a horror story very effectively. So, I really do enjoy this. But I don't want to spoil what's in this issue, but I kind of feel like now I know everything that's going to happen in the next 10 issues. But maybe not. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's some twists, or maybe some interesting character development in unexpected ways could happen. It's a little weaker issue also because at the end of the first issue, spoilers for the first issue, our hero's best friend dies. So there's no buddy road movie left. He's on his own. There's a revelation about someone who may have a connection to him in the town of Stillwater, I suppose. But so it, I don't know. I don't know if this is going to go on to be a great book or not. So I ranked at number 7. The new version of the Edgar Allan Poe horror comedy anthology. Edgar Allan Poe's Snifter of Blood instead of Snifter of Terror, it's now called. You can pick up any issue of these. There's no continuation. It's just kind of somehow Edgar Allan Poe related horror stories, and usually comical horror stories. And the one written by Paul Cornell and drawn by Russ Braun about a black dog was very funny and very horrific, and kind of a perfect example of what this magazine can be like. Then the second story, Atlas Shrugged, was, I don't know, it's written and drawn by Dean Motter, and maybe the art is kind of simple. Maybe if it had some coloring that brought it more to life. The color was kind of drab. The story was okay, and I guess it was kind of funny, but it just didn't click for me quite so much. And the little twist at the end didn't seem as funny as it was supposed to be or whatever. But so one really good story, one okay story. Sadly, they used to always have 2 back pages with a kind of spy versus spy comic strip with Edgar Allan Poe versus the Black Cat, drawn by Hunt Emerson. So I really missed that. But I did read the 3 short pieces of short fiction at the back. And was it 3 or 2? Maybe it was 2. Anyway, they were really good. Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I'm trying to remember what the short stories were about. The werewolf hangover. So anyway, it's a fun issue. Not knock it out of the park like some issues of, as any anthology book are going to be, but it's kind of a shame that their new number 1 was not a knock it out of the park issue. But still, I'll get every issue, and I'm really looking forward to this. And kind of a surprise, or a book that is rising up every time it comes out in my list, is Engine Ward, which with issue 1, I thought, well, I'm probably going to drop it after reading issue 2, but now what are we on, issue 4? Yes, issue 4. And I'm really enjoying it, even though I think it's a very flawed book. I always love the covers. And the art inside is getting a little more exciting. And the story, I'm just becoming more and more interested in how the whole story will play out. It still has some of its flaws as a science fiction story that doesn't establish itself as well as it should. It also indulges in the modern nation of fuck, the modern nation of using the F word all the time for no particular reason, which is odd because elsewhere in the book, other than the F word, they have other expressions based on the fact that they have half-forgotten Earth and think of it as a magical, mystical place. So they have things like by Earth or whatever. Anyway, and that use of the F word really stuck out to me because it was in the grand finale when some surprise thing is coming in on the last page. The character shouts out the F word after having used the F word a number of times throughout. So it didn't have much impact. It's just I got to stop complaining about that. But otherwise, I'm really enjoying this. And I'm finally kind of getting into the art of Joe Eisma, who I've never really enjoyed that much before. There's some cool layouts here. Not the coloring I would love, but there's also an interesting thing going on where the bubbles of different people look different, the word bubbles. So like these godlike Zodiac characters have nice smooth lines around their bubbles, and then the more mortal people have kind of shaky lines around their bubbles, almost amateurish looking. At first I thought the letterer in here was amateurish until I finally noticed that difference. I'm not sure what it means and what it tells us. Okay. For me, the big book of the week, I think for a lot of people, Scumbag came in at number 5. It was fun. It has some really cool art. Although I felt throughout that it was subtly fuzzy. To get this painted look, the colorist kind of... Oh, I don't want to give away some of the key scenes here. The colorist kind of had to add in a lot of blur, a little bit of a subtle touch of blurriness everywhere to make it look, give it a smeary paint look. And I don't know, I get bothered by blurriness. But anyway, very cool art, a very fun concept of this super scummy person who in a lot of ways makes me think of one of the furry freak brothers or something, taken literally and to an extreme, and projected 40 years into the future, so to speak, or 30 years into the future. But I think for me, it was very much on the nose. You know, Rick Remender in his caption boxes would say, "This guy's really scummy, and he treats women really badly." And then we would see a panel where he treats a woman really badly. And I felt he didn't need to do that. There would be a better way to let us discover how scummy this person was. And I found on the text page, he kind of repeats Rick Remender repeats all of his points about the scumbag, describing him like as if he's pitching the character of the scumbag to us. And in the book, in his captions, he's pitching the character of the scumbag to us, rather than just show him be scummy. Although we see him be scummy, and we see some really shockingly bizarre scenes. Again, touching on far more underground, really, than what would be in the Furry Freak Brothers. Touching on a sense of the underground comic aesthetic coming into the superhero or secret agent kind of story. They imply that it's about secret agents, but it feels like it's about superheroes to me. It's a cross between the two. So this definitely looks to be a fun ride, and I'm looking forward to read more. But yeah, so far it's not it's only at number 5. But as I said, everything this week was like a B- to a B+. So we're getting high Bs. We're in the high B zone already. I really enjoyed my number 4 book, Maestro. I got to give a lot of credit to Peter David. He's a great writer, and he doesn't seem to get mentioned that often. And I definitely want to go back, and this is reminding me. There's lots of Peter David's work in the past that I haven't read that I'd like to go back and read. And also, I suddenly remembered back in the 90s, I was reading a good deal of Star Trek novels, and most of the best Star Trek novels that I read were written by Peter David. I wonder if he ever wrote any original novels, or if he's just stuck to Star Trek novels and the like, franchise novels. This book is also very lucky to have a very good artist in German Perlata. That's how you pronounce his name. Good coloring, a bit on the darker side. I would like it a little more clear, but I can't be too picky because I really enjoyed the art. My only real downside about the art is the way they draw this future Hulk's face. He looks a bit, what's the word for it? Where you're like you're a product of too much incest. That squished face, he looks like a bit of a what's the word for it? Anyway, it's a bit of an odd look, and it always jumps out at me. Oh, wait, that face, it looks strange. There's also a backup story, and I don't remember reading the backup story from last issue, so I have to go back and find that. But this was a really excellent issue. Other than the face, I really enjoyed it, and there's no moral center to this story either, like compared to the Conan story. But there's something about it that's entertaining, and there's maybe some question of morality or something going on. Anyway, I enjoyed it a lot. I also enjoyed Family Tree a lot, and I put that at number 3. Now we're getting more into the sort of post-apocalyptic world of trees, of humans turning into trees, that was sort of promised right at the beginning of the first issue. This is now issue 9, so I feel like we're entering a new phase of the story. And Jeff Lemire and his artist have a wonderful rhythm of their storytelling. It reads incredibly fast. I do wish there was a little more dialogue, a little more captions, but it's still a great read. It's a bit confusing, like what's going on in the new present, which is kind of 5 years later. What is at stake now? It's easy for me, having read all the other issues, to understand what's at stake in the in what is now the flashback to what was our present in the previous issue. It's to understand what's at stake there, but I don't know what's at stake in the 5 years later, what's left to be at stake. So I'm curious to see how Lemire will develop that. But I find myself hungering for more and more of this incredible artwork by Phil Hester and his inker Eric Gapster, and I believe that's his inker, and Ryan Cody, his colorist. Ryan Cody, I believe, is the colorist. It doesn't give individual credits, but they all work together wonderfully, and it's nothing like a mainstream superhero book, but it is just really great, and it creates its own reality, so to speak. So I look forward every month, or however often this comes out, just to seeing more of that art. But the story is really great too. Kind of oddly, in at number 2 for me was Rye. I'm just starting to enjoy this more and more. Although talk about, they had to somehow do some blur on the line work, I believe, or makes it look blurry to me, by I forget his name, one of my favorite artists, Juan Jose Ripe. I know he draws this in kind of a grayscale, and then the artist goes over it. and it's very cool art and it's cool coloring, but that slight tinge of blurriness. Maybe that's my real theme today, is a little too much blurriness even in the art that I really liked. But all the elements are developing really nicely, and I really enjoy this science fiction tale written by Dan Abnett. So I look forward to each issue. I think it's a 12 issue series, so I'm glad we're still on issue 8. There's still 4 more issues for me to enjoy. But it's, in a way, it's a very standard robots in the post-apocalyptic story and AIs and all of that. But somehow it just really clicks for me. And finally, another one that's really clicking for me, at number 1, I put Big Girls. Written and drawn by Jason Howard. Does he also do the colors? I think he does the coloring. So the only thing he doesn't do is the lettering. And it's in 3 issues. He has developed a lot of characters, a lot of complexity in his story about this future where some men and some women grow into giants, and the men become these mindless beasts. Or perhaps they're just giant toddlers, even though they don't look like toddlers. And the government that has risen up of the ashes of society after things were destroyed by the giant beasts, who has no mercy on the giant beasts, and then some other people who want to have mercy on the giant beasts, and one of our central characters, who is a giant woman who has to fight the giant. Anyway, I'm not doing a great job of describing it, but it's the layers get richer for me with each issue, and I'm pretty impressed about how much story Jason Howard manages to pack in without. He doesn't pack it with dialogue or explanation, but he's balanced his art and writing in a very good way to communicate a lot in a short period of time. So there you go. I hope your comic book week has been good. Oh, I should have said this at the beginning. Oh well. A comic book reviewer or talker about current comics that I really like has returned after a long hiatus. Walt's comic book, what's it called? Walt's comic book channel? I'm not sure. Walt is the main thing I always remember, and Walt is reading comics in English over in Germany, and always has a lot of intelligent things to say about them. And so I'll leave a link to one of his latest videos. I think he's done 2 or 3 now in the last 2 or 3 weeks, or maybe less. So I think he's really back, and I'm excited that he is. So welcome back, Walt. Talk to you all later. Bye-bye.